don't know me, my name is Daniel Schwartz. It was one of the greatest pleasures of my life. Boruch's uncle. I've had, sadly, occasion in Moscow before. I eulogized my father. 20, I eulogized your uncle who raised me like a father. We had a break at age 36, I eulogized your grandmother. All of those occasions, I somehow felt worthy, I somehow felt it appropriate. The son should send off his father, nephew and uncle, his ample precedent. Nickel, Rababi, also. Tonight, the inadequacies are tremendous. When Boruch passed from this world, went to Facebook, place everybody goes, and I wrote, "Oh, our dear sweet Boruch, you lived so fast and left us so soon. I only wish I'd loved you better." That's what my comments are going to be about tonight. I wish I had loved you better. The Kriyas HaTorah of Rosh Hashanah is enigmatic. As opposed to every other regel, where we read the passages in the Torah about that holiday as the main reading, Shoshana would go through an episode in Bereshis, the birth of Yitzchak, Akedas Yitzchak. And even though there is a Chazal, difficult to understand Chazal, because Chazal don't explain themselves, where they say the Akedah took place on Rosh Hashanah, although Chazal doesn't say how they came to that conclusion. They do that. Perhaps they are recording what was a known Nesoida, Nedoidus, the Akedah took place, Rosh Hashanah. It begs the question, why would we still read of the Akedah and the events preceding it, Rosh Hashanah? Throughout, Bnei Yisrael spent 40 Rosh Hashanah in the Midbar. I'm sure many other mitzvahs in the Torah, many other things took place on Rosh Hashanah. Why the Akedah? Why the banishment of Hagar from the house of Abraham? When I first contemplated the question 20-some-odd years ago as a student, I formed an answer for myself, which I reminded myself for every year, Rosh Hashanah, as we read the Akedah. And it's based upon a word of Chaim Brisker. Chaim Brisker says that Avraham Avinu was the consummate halachic man, to borrow from his grandson's nomenclature. Avraham Avinu being presented with a dilemma of, on the one hand, take your beloved singular son and offer him as a sacrifice to me. On the one hand, he's commanded this. On the other hand, Avraham Avinu knows that child sacrifice is an anathema in the Jewish ethic, in our Meleches HaKodesh. As the ultimate halachic man, what did Avraham Avinu do? He went into the dilemma because Avraham Avinu also knew the Yud Gimel Midas of Rabbi Yishmael, says Chaim Brisker. In the 13th hermeneutic of Rabbi Yishmael, V'chein shenei kesuvim hamachishim zeh et zeh ad sheyavo hakosov hashlishi v'yachriya b'neihem. If you have two verses in the Bible that seem to contradict each other, there will come a third verse which will explain and resolve the contradiction. Avraham Avinu being the perfect halachic man, says Chaim Brisker, and a Baal Bitochen, went into the dilemma and continued forward, confident, knowing the third verse is going to come. B'machriya b'neihem. We'll go one way or the other, and destiny will be defined by that third verse. The Kachavet. And that's what it was. For the past 20-some-odd years, every year on Rosh Hashanah, I remind myself that we read the Akedah. Why? To remind ourselves that we have to be Balei Bitochen. We stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yom Hadin, beg for our lives. And at the same time, we are confident. We have bitochen, we have faith, and we are assured to ourselves that we know that everything God decides to do, every action that He will take, will be perfect. Not good, not beautiful, not ugly, perfect. Perfect. Because God is the Machia Beineihem. And for 20-some-odd years, every year, this is how I've carried myself through Rosh Hashanah, reminding myself, try to be a Baal B'tochen. Try to know that whatever happens in the coming year is part of God's perfection. It didn't work this year. It just didn't work. I sat in shul, listening to the lady, listened to a new cousin who was laning. I feel no comfort. None. I was very troubled. Because my explanation answers the laning for the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, you read the Akedah to learn a lesson of B'tochen. But what about the laning for the first day? The whole first day during the laning this year, I kept on thinking to myself, why? What do we need to know? Why do we have to remind ourselves of the inner workings of Abraham's house? One wife, son, was tormenting another son, throw her out. And then a question jumped off the page, which troubled me the whole yontif. But not only did it trouble me, but my troubles troubled me. Because it jumped off to me from the page. Avram Avinu, who is chesed typified. Chazal say Avram Avinu is chesed. He is compassion, he is empathy. Why didn't Avram Avinu tell Hagar the nevuah he had before he cast her out? Sarah comes to Avram Avinu and says, Garesh es ha'ama hazois v'esbena, throw her out. She's tormenting our son. Avram Avinu didn't want to do it. And God comes to Avram Avinu and says, Kol asher tomer lecha Sarah shema v'koila, everything that Sarah says to you, do it. And he promises Avram Avinu, V'gam es ben ha'ama hazois l'goya simenu ki zarechohu. Don't worry, your other son, the son of this maidservant, I will make him too into a nation, because he is from you, he is from your seed. Avram Avinu knew that when he banished this wife and his son from his home, he knew it was part of God's perfection. He was chesed typified. Why didn't he tell his wife? Why didn't he say to her, Hagar, you have to leave. You have to leave because Yitzchak can't be Yitzchak with you here. Yishmael won't become Yishmael with you staying here. But if you go, Yitzchak will be Yitzchak. Yishmael will be Yishmael. Don't worry. I know. Avinu Shabashamayim told me. And it occurred to me that if you would have done that, the agony that Hagar suffered, where she had to go and sit herself an arrow's flight away from her son who was sitting under a thistle brush, because she couldn't bring herself to watch what she was afraid was going to be the death of her son. And Yishmael's cries, Kasher Husham, would have been evaded. I was troubled by this the whole yontif. And that I was troubled by this bothered me because we are conditioned here. We're not supposed to think of the office in these terms. Even if there's going to be a moral lesson to be learned by their actions, it should jump back at us as quickly as the question comes. And for days, this bothered me. Chesed typified. Allow this type of suffering into his own family. Yishmael was his son. Why? And it occurred to me that perhaps I never really understood the Akedah. The Akedah was not entirely about B'tochen. Rather, the Akedah was the Vedic name. From Avinu for whatever reasons he had, inflicted or allowed this torture to be inflicted upon his wife and son. And Baruch Junger inflicted it back to him. Hagar suffered chaos and not knowing, and unsurety and fear for the life of her son. Avraham Avinu walked up the mountain with Yitzchak with the same fear. When Yitzchak asked him, where is the sacrifice Nati? Avraham Avinu, exasperated, doesn't know what to say. He says, let God show it. Unable to assure his son that everything will be okay. Unable to promise him that we're going to come back. And the suffering that Yishmael went through that afternoon under the bush, Avraham Avinu had to inflict it upon his son. He had to come a hair's breadth away from taking his son's life. When Avraham Avinu perhaps understood, he should have had greater empathy. He expelled his wife. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to him through the Malach and said, Al tishlach yad benar. Don't lay a hand on this boy. Rabbi Isai suggests to you the Akedah is not about Bitochen. It is. It's about much more. It's about the nexus between the mitzvahs ve'od and malachot. We read it on Rosh Hashanah, not simply, not only to bolster our faith. We read it on Rosh Hashanah to remind ourselves and to know that true Eved Hashem, true servant of God, is one who is an Oivus Habrius, is one who loves his people first. Avraham Avinu was able to be Omed al Nisoyin because he was a Baal Bitochen. Ultimately, with the love of his son, with the love of humanity, that's the lesson that we have to take from it. It should be obvious why I chose this theme. We've heard tremendously from everyone who spoke about my nephew's tremendous pain, his love of family, his love of people. I want to go back. I want to present you a picture. A picture of who was this Jewish. On my sister's mantelpiece in her dining room, there's a picture of Baruch when he was about 2 years old. It's the one of him in the Lakewood suit with the red bow tie. His long hair. That impish grin that he had with him his whole life. But it's not the face that speaks to me. It's not the face that I've noticed every time I look at that picture. It's the hands. It's hands that are extended prayerfully, like it's out in front. Hands. It's those hands that say to me, come, let's play. Let's not touch the floor. Let's jump over the couches, let's jump over the piano. Come, let's play. Let's torture a cat a little bit. Let's have a good time. And he was never content until you got on your hands and knees and you played. And you had to play with him. I was never one, until I had children of my own, until I had my own children, I was never one to roll on the floor with other children. But Baruch, he made me do it. He wouldn't stop. The hands. What would become? I'll show you something of me. I'll share something intimate with you. But on my terms. Come play with me. It's hands. Hands that come stretch out prayerfully, beseechingly. Hold my hand. The world is scary. I'm afraid. Comfort me. Be with me. I wished I had loved him better. I wish that I had been there to comfort him more. I look out at this crowd of people here, a few familiar faces, mostly people I have never met before. And we're joined only by our association with this dear sweet boy. And my first instinct would be to walk up to him, put my arm around him, give him a pinch on his cheek and say, Boruch, you give me nachas. There's a yeshiva in Lakewood where you are an honored and esteemed member. You have friends who have the respect of Rabbanim. I wish I loved him better. I wish I had known of this place before. I wish I would have come here one night to sit and learn with him for an hour. I wish I could have done that. But instead, we are all Avram Avinu tonight. But we really are. Avram Avinu got to keep his Yitzchak. We didn't. He was taken from us Erev Rosh Hashanah as 1 year ended before another began. The point of completion. At a time when the rest of the world is supposed to go and beg for another year. And there's no reason in begging for another year. There is no reason in begging God for more life except to do his bidding. We beg God, forgive us our iniquities, annul us of our vows that we haven't kept. Give us a chance to do better. Baruch left us. No. Baruch was called from us. God said to him, you don't have to